Why do people often tell others that they should leave rather than cheat? Besides the obvious, like the losing the family, making things worse. But why do we? What is the root cause for why we tell people, why don't you just? Why didn't you just leave me? Why didn't you just? Why didn't you just leave? Why did you have to cheat?
Hurt. Sham
It's
brought it up
betrayal.
earlier. Yeah, Sham brought it up earlier. He talked about hurt, about there not being an excuse, and it was such a real point. But truth is a person who's hurt, everything is an excuse, because somebody who's hurt, every reason you give them is you giving an excuse, and I think that's why it is. So in their head, the simple solution is leave, because people can't reconcile that I could cheat and still love you and not meant to hurt you.
It's plenty of different reasons why people cheat. You definitely There's usually a situation where somebody left the door open for it, right? So you're not doing something that the other person expects of you, right? There's also people who are not monogamous. They just didn't realize it until after they were married or after they're in a serious relationship. They just realize that they're not a person who's really good at monogamy at all. And if that's the situation, you're guaranteed to be in trouble. So the main point is women are going to do it, men are going to do it, but if you try to communicate sometimes, even that doesn't even work. So there's certain people who you would get with, right? Let's say you're a man and you're like, you know what? Um, I think like once every 2 weeks is not really cool. Maybe we could get down and like, I go to work too, or I'm tired, or what are you doing? So you can't always. There's some people who you just can't communicate that to, right? Where they're just not understanding. And anytime you try to come to them and say, "Hey, listen, this is what I need from you," they're just really not trying to hear it. They'll throw that right back at you. There's a lot of women who behave like that. So every time you try to bring something to their attention, then they just flip it right back onto you. And then at that point, you have broken communication. So you're gonna say, "Well, damn, I still want my needs to get met. So let me see what homegirl doing over here." So a lot of times you just it's tough, and I'm not saying that's the right way either. You should communicate that to them, or just leave for real. Like that's your best idea. If you can't work it out with that person, you need to cheat, particularly sexually, then you probably should just leave, because you as much things are at risk between your child support, alimony, everything else, you're gonna be screwed no matter what. So you might as well just go ahead and leave. Don't add cheating to it. It's never a winning game. But I think that the hardest part of it is trying to communicate your wants and needs. A lot of us don't have that ability to communicate with our partner. You might have lost communication with that partner. Maybe you just not really comfortable with each other. Maybe you just don't like each other. And a lot of times you may grow. The person that you are, you get with somebody in your 20s, you fall into the idealism and you say, "Hey, listen, let me go ahead and get married." Kind of like Jay Stanza's point, saying you succumb to what society tells you to do. Then now you're trying to do the right thing. You want to get married by a certain age. You want 2.5 kids, the white picket fence and everything. You're trying to do that and fall within society's standards of the American dream. And then you wake up, realize it was a nightmare, and you're like, "This ain't it. Maybe I did this too early, or maybe I'm too early, because what I used to like and appreciate at 25 is no longer what I like and appreciate in a woman at 35, or certainly not 45." So it's a lot of problems with that, particularly compatibility issues, because it's very difficult to work with people. Women, they want attention. And a lot of times, if you're a man that's on his purpose, he's on his grind, you won't always be able to give that woman attention. And there are some women who are understanding of it and are able to do their own thing. But there's a lot of women who feel like they must have your attention all the time. And they're like, "Oh, well, we don't go anywhere. Oh, we don't do anything like we were supposed to." But you like, "Listen, it's grind season. I'm trying to get it." But they're not going to always be understanding to that, because they just want your time. They just want to be around you. They don't have that same sense of urgency when it comes to the work in most cases like men do. When we're on our purpose, we lock in a lot of times. It's good if we can compartmentalize and say, all right, this is family time, this is that. But not all of us are always the greatest at it. I know I'm guilty of just going too hard sometimes. But, you know, fortunately, I do have a wife who's understanding of it, but not everybody's going to have that. Right. So unless you're able to have that balance and that communication, you're leaving the window open for cheating no matter what.
All right.
Let me ask the fellas the question real quick. Why do people often tell others that they should leave rather than cheat? Besides the obvious, like the losing the family, making things worse, but what is the root cause for why we tell people, why didn't you just leave me? Why didn't you just leave? Why did you have to cheat?
Hurt. Sham
It's
brought it
betrayal.
up earlier. Yeah, Sham brought it up earlier. He talked about hurt, about there not being an excuse. And it was such a real point. But truth is a person who's hurt, everything is an excuse. Because, you know, somebody who's hurt, every reason you give them is you giving an excuse. And I think that's why it is. So in their head, the simple solution is leave, because people can't reconcile that I could cheat and still love you and not meant to hurt you. It's a very difficult thing to grasp for most people, because people associate, if you love him, well, you wouldn't have done this. And it's very hard for people to reconcile that you can still love a person and don't want to hurt them and still want to be with them. And it just so happened that you cheated as well. So I think that's where that comes from.
I also think that, you know, a lot of people view it as betrayal and deception. Whereas if you say we're no longer compatible, it is what it is. I mean, it's unfortunate that you would have to go through a situation like that. But when you actually cheat, that's betrayal. And a betrayal is very different, in my opinion.
All right.
I like that verbiage. I like the verbiage you just used. We're no longer compatible, because it doesn't put the other person's defenses up automatically. They don't want to get ready to fight. They don't want to attack you off top. When you say we're just not, I don't feel as though we're compatible anymore, or it's like we're not compatible anymore. It's like, it almost sounds like a fact. And when you say it like that, people tend to take a step back. They calm down a little bit. They take a breather. Well, maybe we're not. And then you go on to lay down the reasons why you're no longer compatible. Not excuses, but reasons. You might have a case there. You might have a case. But to answer the question, I'm a big proponent, you know, kind of what Shan was talking about. Don't lie. Just don't lie. I'm a believer in being 100% standing on your manhood and telling somebody exactly who you are. When it goes from the talking phase, the dating phase, to if you end up going down the committed relationship route, the engagement, the marriage, whatever. Every relationship nowadays is not traditional. It's not traditional monogamy. And the same thing with the women. The women of this day and age have to be honest with not only their partners, but with themselves, of what type of relationship and what type of person they truly are and how they are in relationships. Are you really a one-man woman? There's a lot of women out here that are in the streets right now that have never had a real serious long-term committed relationship. They just jump from dude to dude to dude to dude to dude. They have a whole bunch of micro relationships. 3 months here, 3 months there, 3 months here, on to the next dick, on to the next dick, on to the next dick. Never fix themselves, never identify their issues, never figure out why it doesn't work out, never take the time to look in the mirror and figure out what's wrong with them, or never take the time to be alone and address their own issues. As a man, I can speak for most of us on this panel, or almost all of us on this panel, that we have all at least taken a time period to be alone, to look at the man in the mirror, to figure out, to have some time of self-reflection on what's going on in my life? What the fuck do I need to do differently? How do I need to move? And what did I do wrong? What do I need to own? And how do I move forward? Whether that's in life in general, whether that's in your work situation, your career, or in relationships. But we have to be honest with each other on what kind of relationship we would like to have and what type of person that we are and what's realistically sustainable for us to do what we need to do. Whether that's, hey, when you met me, I had other women. I've always had other women. I've always needed something else. I love you, but I got bust his nuts sometimes.